Welcome to this video. Welcome to this video. Yes, indeed, welcome to this video. This is going to be number 1 of 3 videos, all about mixing vocals. So in this first video, I'm going to talk about mixing the lead vocal. In the second video, I'm going to talk about kind of thickening vocals and tricks you can do with processing and with adding other layers and stuff. And then in the third video, we're going to talk about backing vocals, harmonies, all that kind of deal. Okay, so very kindly been allowed by Hot Moth to use their track Leveling the Tails for this. It's a track, if you've watched any of my other videos, it's the intro track that I use a lot. It's a really cool song, really good band, no longer together. I emailed them today with some strongly worded views on the fact that they should get back together and shouldn't have broken up, basically. So if you want to track them down and do the same, I suggest you do. That would be good. I won't rub it on too much. Let's get into mixing a vocal. Let's look at this verse vocal to start with. I guess looking at the mechanics of how the vocal works before we start getting too carried away with EQ and all this kind of thing. There's 2 reasons we would use a compressor or an EQ, okay? And the first reason is more the mechanical thing. So with a compressor, controlling the dynamic, with an EQ, making it cut through the mix, kind of the more utilitarian aspect of it. So there's that, and there's also character and tone, and that's also a reason we would use compression and EQ. And sometimes the lines are blurred and it's a bit of both. But sorry, car's going past, it's really putting me off. It's really hot. I'm going to get increasingly sweaty throughout this video, and I don't apologise. I don't apologise. Yes, I was talking about the dynamics and everything, and that takes me seamlessly onto the fact that we've got some automation already here. It's worth the extra time sometimes just to see if you can get your vocal balanced before you start hitting everything, and it just means you go a bit easier when you're processing sometimes. So in this case, I wanted to hit the vocal quite hard in terms of compression, kind of saturation and distortion, and I really wanted to bring the kind of breathiness and character out of Matt's vocal. He's a really good singer, and yeah, I wanted to capture all that stuff. So this is bringing out, just tucking down some of the breaths and things, and S's as well. S's and the plosives and the sibilants are the things that compressors kind of bring out, and you can use DS's and stuff, and we'll get on to that. But you can do it this way with some volume automation, save yourself a bit of work, and also you could use clip gain as well. And that's, again, the mechanical reason for doing this. You can also use these things in a creative way as well. So for instance, let's do the clip gain on a phrase. So say I wanted to bring something out of this. Let's have a look. So things like the end of phrases are quite cool for this. So if we just selected that, separated it, just bung the clip gain up a little bit, we'll have brought out that little exit of that line. Just another way to do these things. And a vocal's important. It's something that people are always listening to. In the average kind of, when the vocal is the centre of the music, which it is in a lot of music, it's very important, and a lot of people leave it to last and don't take enough care on it. So that's where a lot of the emotion of the song can lie. So some of these tricks that we're going to talk about are ways to bring out that emotion and that feeling of a vocal. So that's kind of what it's all about, really. So let's listen to a bit of this verse, and this is just as it came kind of thing. So I tracked this a long time ago now. This would have been, I think this is one of the last things I did in Stronghold Studios that I used to run with Jez Walton and Dave Archer big up yourselves in New Haven. That's the place. I've dug out this photo here. I dug out the photo before the video, so I know for a fact this was done on the U87, Neumann U87 into a Vintech 1073 preamp, maybe a touch of EQ and a bit of 1176 while we're tracking, but it's not overly compressed or anything. But this is it raw. I'll shut up and just play it.
Set inside a busy mind.
Okay, there we go. And that's kind of cutting through okay. Another thing that I want to point out is that we're doing this in a slightly false way. We've got the backing track mixed and I'm mixing in a vocal. This isn't always something that can work for you, so I'd suggest always having the vocal there, even if the vocal is something you like to sort of tackle more towards the end of the mix. It is for me, to be honest, a lot of the time, but I'll always have it there, either with some rough processing on to give me an idea of how it's going to sound, or even raw, but I'll be checking that that vocal is working in the mix the whole time, because the danger is you'll paint yourself into a corner and just not leave enough space for it. Worth doing. Often when you put the vocal in as well, it makes the whole thing just make a bit more sense as well. Stops you obsessing about some of the other stuff that's going on. Okay, so we've done that. We'll come back to that automation. And what I'm going to do in general with these videos, with the vocal videos, is just try and put this in an order or a step-by-step process. So you don't always have to follow these as rules, but those of you especially who are a bit newer to mixing might find this useful. What I would do first is cut out all the nonsense in the vocal and consolidate it. So what I mean by the nonsense is any noises, breaths, sniffing, keys, jangling, all that kind of stuff that you don't want in there. Make sure it's all clean and ready to go. And then the first plugin in my chain would normally be something like a Pro Q2, a clean kind of EQ, a more clinical EQ, I suppose, just to control anything I don't want to be there. So in this case, I've done a bit of a high pass at sort of 71, and I've pulled out a little bit of like low mids there, around 450, 460. So
They said I'd gone a while again. I want to, but I won't do.
yeah, okay, so that's very subtle what I'm pulling out there. I mean, in some cases you will be doing more because you'll have a bit of a honk in the vocal or whatever. But to be honest, I was pretty happy with the raw sound on that. I didn't have to do too much. But the purpose of this first plugin would be to control any unwanted sort of resonances and things like that in the vocal. So this is what I'm talking about with how we order things. So it's kind of like, make sure the track's all clean in terms of on your edit window, you know, cutting out all the bits that you don't want. And then your first EQ being the one to correct anything that you deem undesirable, I suppose. So there wasn't too much undesirable here, so that's cool. And then I'm doubling down on my compression here. And you might say, Mark, you compressed this on the way in. Why are you doing it again? Why? And the reason is this sort of serial compression is kind of the key with a lot of stuff when it comes to mixing, but it works really well for vocals, and it's about doing kind of a few layers and doing a little bit less, not trying to expect one plugin or one bit of kit to do all the work. It just kind of helps it along a little bit. So my tracking compressor wasn't doing a hell of a lot. It would have been to catch the louder parts, catch the peaks and things, add a little bit of character. So I'm hitting it a bit harder with this this one here. This again is 1176 emulation. So let's hear what this does.
I'd never run, but they said I'd gone a while again.
Okay, so that's obviously, I hope you can hear, that's sort of flattened it out a little bit and brought out a little bit of character as well. Especially the fast release on these style plugins adds a little bit of, it just brings it forward in the mix a little bit. So this is probably a good point to listen to that again in the mix. It's fairly well volume matched as well. So we'll start in bypass and then I'll put it in. Let's listen to that section again.
I'd never run, but they said I'd gone. I'd never run, but they said I'd gone a while again.
Okay, so that's definitely sitting in there a lot better already just with that one compressor on there. I'm then hitting this guy, which is a CLA2A from Waves Audio Limited, and it's in limit mode. So this one is just catching any remaining peaks and just clamping this vocal down a little bit. So let's bung this one on, first without, then with.
I'd never run, but they said I'd gone a while again. I'd never run, but they said I'd gone a while again.
Yeah, that's just smoothed it out even more. Both of those have added their own little bit of character as well. I think that's enough compression going on really there, and now it's time for a bit of saturation. And this was a very subtle one here, but I'll ramp it up to show you what it's doing a little bit.
I'd never run, but they said I'd gone a while again. I want to, but I won't do. Oh, they said inside a busy mind.
Okay, so that's just a subtle bit of kind of thickening, brings the vocal forward a little bit, just gives it a bit more of a nice tone, I suppose, a bit of character, a bit of rock and roll, man, stuff like that. Oh God, yeah. Next we have a Deesser. This is a good point to put a Deesser in. So again, going in these stages, we've done our corrective EQ, we've done our cleanup on the audio, we've done our corrective EQ, and then done some compression, a little bit limiting. And some people use L2s and all kind of things on vocals, whatever it takes to make it sound how you want it to sound. Bit of distortion, kind of saturation there with the decapitator. And then I'm going to do a bit of de-essing, especially with distortion. It will bring out the S's. So this is a good point in the chain to put a de-esser to control that. So this last phrase I think has got some S's going on. So
Some false truths will cause wounds to hurt.
okay, let's put the de-esser on that.
Some false truths will cause wounds to hurt.
Okay, so yeah, that's kind of helped control that a little bit. The artifact it's had, in my mind, is it's made the vocal sound, or the vocal generally sounds a little bit dull still, and the de-esser often adds to that. So again, going back to this chain, this would be a good time to kind of add the tonal EQ. This is where I often do it. So brightening it up a bit, putting a bit of a broad shelf just to kind of give it an airy sort of quality. So for that, I've got this Marg EQ, and yeah, I love this EQ. I use this on master bus and drums and things as well. So let's hear what this has done to that vocal.
Some false truths will cause wounds to hurt. Some false truths will cause wounds to hurt.
Okay, so that's just kind of, you're almost bringing that character back into it after sucking it out with some of the other processing, because everything has its kind of downside, and that's one of the detrimental effects you can have sometimes, is as you're crushing things you lose a bit of that sparkle with the vocal. Other than that, on this I've just added a bit of this micro shift, which I've talked about before. This is a Sound Toys plugin. It's kind of harmonizer type effect, and this just, it's like a very subtle pitchy chorusy thing, and I just like it. So let's listen to that, shall we?
I'd never run, but they said I'd gone.
And with
I'd never run, but they said I'd gone.
so that kind of, that does a thing for me. That kind of makes it sit nicely. It's almost adds a little kind of almost the same effect as a slap delay would have, where you use a real subtle slap delay and it just puts the vocal in the mix a little bit. So I'm into that. That's cool. So that's the last thing in the chain there. I've now turned the automation on. So let's have a listen to it with that automation as well. You can see as it's going, I'll put the fader up as well. You can sort of see why I've done this stuff.
I'd never run, but they said I'd gone. Hey, want again? I want to, but I won't do. Oh, they said inside. Hey, busy mind. Some false truths will cause wounds to hurt me.
So I was bringing down some of the breaths and some of the S's as well, and especially in this last phrase here.
Some false truths will cause wounds to hurt me.
Okay, so that's what I've done with the automation. It may seem a little bit sort of fiddly and finicky, but believe me, it saves you headache in the long term, and just helps some of the heavy lifting, I suppose. And there's reasons in particular with this vocal that this is going to help us out later. When we get onto the next video, I'm going to talk about some of the processing and things that have made this particular bit of automation more necessary. So that's the main vocal working really. We've done our sort of stage by stage thing now. We've got the track cleared up, everything's cleaned up, and we've taken any bits we don't like out of the physical audio, got rid of any old takes, done any vocal tuning, get that stuff done, just get it ready, and done a bit of automation, see if we can get it sit nicely in the mix. Then we've tackled it with a bit of corrective EQ, just pulling out anything that we're not keen on in the vocal, listen out for kind of resonances. If you record your vocal in a booth, sometimes you get a honkiness in there that is a good idea to pull out before you start compressing and all this kind of thing. Equally, sometimes with the proximity effect, a lot of vocals done really close now, and it's nice and it's really present, but depending on your mix, you might have to pull a little bit of this low end out as well. So get all that stuff done prior to getting keen with the compression. It's going to make your compressors work better and just give you less of a headache. Then after that, we added a 1176 style compressor, which was controlling the dynamic, adding a little bit of character. Then we had an LA2 with much higher ratio. It's kind of limiting. It's just catching any peaks, smoothing it out, helping it sit in the mix. Just going to have a drink of water. That's lukewarm water. The decapitator was helping us just a little bit in this case with just a bit of saturation, distortion. Helps the vocal to cut through, gives it a bit of tone, makes it sit in the mix a bit better. Then a Deesser, controlling anything additional that the compressors brought out that we've tried to get rid of with the automation. And then the kind of character tonal EQ after that, so brightening it back up again. And finally there was the micro shift, which is just adding the tiniest bit of modulation, giving it some stereo interest. We've gone through all that, and then we've got this delay throw going on that you've been hearing that I should probably taken out, to be honest, but there we go, I didn't. So this is hitting the Echo Boy, just a quarter note, kind of tubey, tapey, characterful delay that I've panned off to one side, and it's just being sent via this automation here, so it's muted except for certain words, and that's sent through. So yeah, it's bus 38 sent through from here, pre-fader, so I can set the level of this delay throw. Because it's pre-fader, it doesn't matter if I automate my lead vocal around, that delay is always going to be the same volume, which is useful in this case. Other than that, I've just got a reverb going on. Okay, so let's listen to it without the reverb and then with, and then I'll quickly talk to you about what I did with the reverb.
Never run. They said I'm gone. Hey, what again?
Okay, with the reverb.
Never run. They said I'm gone. Hey, what again? I want to, but I won't do. Oh,
Yes, let's have a look at that reverb. So I've got the outer verb. It's a plate setting, which works really well for vocals a lot of the time. Plates. There's a bit of an EQ internally in the plugin that I've used. Pulled out a little bit of mid-range, kind of 1K area, and down here, sort of lower down. What's that like? Yeah, just under 200. Just shaping it a bit there. Took a bit of the top end off as well. This helps it not to intrude so much, having a darker reverb, and pulling out that 1K-ish area. Don't go exactly by the kind of frequencies I'm calling out, but pulling that kind of area out can help the vocal cut through a bit more. That's where a lot of the information is in a vocal. So it allows you to get that reverb up a bit and not smear out the vocal, essentially. I've then got a EQ afterwards, which is why you should always pretty much always put your reverb on an auxiliary, because it allows you to sculpt it after the fact without messing with the actual vocal sound. If you put it straight on your vocal track, then put an EQ, you can't EQ the reverb on its own. You're going to be EQing the combination of those two things. So always a good idea to send it to an auxiliary. I even sent the delay throw to the same reverb a little bit, put them in the same space. Yeah, it's just a further bit of that mid-range coming out, which just allows me to kind of almost get the reverb either side of it a little bit, if you know what I mean. Okay, so I think that's enough for this first video. That could be all you need to get your lead vocal working in a mix. What I was playing you there wasn't what it ended up being. I've done quite a bit more to give it more character and make it a bit more interesting, really, and that's what I'm going to talk about in the next video. You've got that to look forward to. See some fun stuff that we can do to further improve that. Yes, I hope that was interesting, and thanks very much for watching, and do subscribe if you want to. In the next video, as I said, we're going to be making that lead vocal more interesting, and we're also going to talk about adding some other bits and pieces to it, both effects wise and layers of vocals as well. So tune in next week for video 2. Next week. See you next week. Thanks for watching.